Okay, so one thing I do want to mention is that next week we are doing, it looks like we're doing Project 5, which is kind of a combination of Project 3 and Project 4. So I will make every attempt to get your grades for your Project 3 grades to you back by probably a week from today. Okay, so before the next Q&A, I'm anticipating to have your Project 3 grades for you. Remember, I'm grading Project 3, and I'm going to be nitpicky, okay? Okay, so with that, let me go ahead and hand it over to Dr. A.
Okay, Zoom loves to move things around. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So in module 4, up until this point, what we've done is, let's say we've got a browser on your laptop and we've been developing against a NPM server running on port 8081. And that's all fine. And then when it comes time to basically hit the server project back from project 1, I think, where we just served a page that said $N that we can hit Tomcat on port 8080. So what are we doing in this module? We're really adding an API server into Tomcat so that we can get data back out to our browsers, and we're going to be getting that data from a global database, a database that is for your bookstore. So you each have your own database, and you can install MySQL locally, and you can have a local database, and you could make your Tomcat point to the local database. We are also running a central CS5244 database server where each of you have your own databases. So I just wanted to highlight that that's what we're setting up in this project. So you'll be setting up the database in the first part of the project and then implementing some functions in the API server to get category and book data back out to the browser. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So if we look at these things in blue, I'm going to imagine that the blue boxes are on your laptop and the gray boxes are what we're running centrally for you. So just want to run through what we're doing. So we're adding the databases in this project and the API server, and you'll browse, the Tomcats will connect to those databases. You'll be able to connect to the central one or your local one. When you get to upload your project, you'll be using the central database or your database on the central database server.
So can I just make an observation, Dr. A?
Sure.
I think, I think it's fair to say that folks should focus on, even on their local project, getting things to work with the CS5244 database.
Sure.
I mean, the local database, we want you to know how to set that up. It's great if you have it. It means that you don't have to rely on the CS5244 server, okay? But make sure, you know, even before you upload your project, make sure it works with the CS5244 database.
That's a good point, Dr. K, because it's the data there that we're going to grade with, because we're going to hit the CS5244 Tomcat here when we're grading. So it will be the data in the central database that matters.
And the other point I want to say while we're on the topic is that I have set up databases for everybody already. So your database should be set up. So one of the first things we want you to do is check that you can access your CS5244 database. And make sure I set it up right. Maybe I got the password wrong or something like that. So please let me know on Piazza if you cannot access that. And that is one of the things that Dr. A will show you how to do.
Absolutely, it's coming right up. So You can browse to your Tomcat and you can see the results of your API server in this project. And after you upload your WAR file, you'll be able to browse to your website on the central server. And the data comes from the respective places, depending on which database you point to. But we will start with using the CS5244 databases. And I just had a little nice animation where if you do an npm run build, we're really just moving the client app to be served from the local Tomcat on port 8080, as well as the API server. That's what we'll be doing next module. And then each of them turn into a WAR file, and the WAR file gets, well, the animation went too fast, but there you go. So I wanted to I'm going to try and attempt to set up a fresh project in IntelliJ to start off the module 4. There's already been questions on Piazza. We are going to be setting up one project for project 4, and it's going to be called Your Name Bookstore REST. So let me start by setting up a new project. And this is off screen for you for a moment. So I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to be using Java 11, 12, or 13, not 14 or above, as some people have discovered. It's going to be a Gradle project. I'm going to use Java and web components, additional libraries and frameworks. I'm going to call this Dr. A Bookstore REST Walk. And it's going to be in where all my Dr. A Bookstore projects are going to be. I will wipe out the group ID in the version, set this up. I want a new window, please. And I want to bring that new window over here. Let's just make that full screen. Okay, so
a couple things on the chat. The instructions make it seem like a separate project needs to be set up for Part B. I'll look at the instructions, but that is not true.
I've fixed all of the references that would indicate that. There's quite a few little nitpicks that had to be cleaned up. If you're still confused, hopefully you're not anymore, and hopefully you'll be able to read it. Okay, so I'm going to stick with my Dr. A Bookstore REST walk for the entire module 4.
And I think Dr. A answers the question, what's wrong with JDK 14 on Piazza?
Yeah, somebody's had a problem on Piazza with getting Part B to work. And it's because our libraries are a little bit older and don't work with the latest Java. Okay, fine. And if you have questions about how to install multiple JDKs, I can answer that on Piazza too. So what I've done is I've created a blank Gradle project with Java and web. So we have a pretty empty project here. We've got a standard build.gradle file. I'm going to do something a little bit optional to start off with. That's not in the walkthrough. It's optional, but I'm going to create a file. Why does it do this to me? I'm going to create a file called .editorconfig in the very top level of this project. And editorconfig is a new standard that's basically, no matter what editor you use, it lets you enforce coding styles. So I want to say, by default, my indent size is going to be 2. I'm going to use spaces, not tabs, things like that. And it's going to be 4 for SQL files. If you want any more information about that, I'm happy to answer questions on Piazza. I just wanted to show you that it exists. And if we can debate it out and adopt one, then everyone's code will be looking much more similar. It makes it easier to read.
And Dr. A, is this for Java? Is this for JavaScript? Is this for everything? Or
we can do it for our server project now, and we can do it for our client project with different instructions, obviously, next time around. So it's per module, basically.
Oh, okay.
And it just means that if you are sharing the project with someone else and they're editing it, then it's more readable. Here, I'm just letting people know this is one of the latest things that's come out, because everyone has their own favorite tool to edit files, and this is making things the same so that you can't make a mistake and disrupt the project by not doing the right indenting. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, according to the instructions, is we need to tell our server project what libraries we use. So we're going to use our own build.gradle file. I'm just going to paste it in because it is in the project description. So I'm going to paste it in, and you'll see that really all we've done is added saying that Tomcat is around when we run, and we need a couple of tag libraries and a ability to connect to a MySQL database. And these are Java libraries with specific versions that we're pulling in to the project. But it doesn't happen by magic. We've actually now got to build the project. So I like seeing this little elephant over here, load Gradle changes. You can also just hit the build project. I'm going to just load the Gradle changes. Now, Gradle is a sort of a build system that's also independent of a particular tool. And what we've just told IntelliJ is, look at our build.gradle, download all these libraries, and compile all the code. There is no code, so it was very fast, under half a second. But you can see build successful shows up in our build tab here, which is also a build tab here. So we've got all the libraries that we need, but we're not using them yet. So the next step is to say, well, what do we get in this example web application that we've just sort of used as a template so far? Well, we get an index.jsp file. So what I want to do is I want to just give it a title, maybe Dr. A Bookstore, and a body says, you know, welcome to Dr. A's bookstore served by Tomcat. And I've got a lazy pinky finger. All right. So what we want to do is launch Tomcat and see that show up, just to know that we've got a good basis to get going. So I'm going to click Add Configuration. This is our Run Configuration area. I'm going to add configuration, and then I'm going to add a Tomcat. Again, you've probably done this a couple of times. Looks like I have one already set up. So I've got a Tomcat Fall 2020 already set up. So I'm going to use that Tomcat. I'm going to call this Tomcat Fall 2020. That seems fine to me. I want to fix the artifacts for deployment. When I deploy this, I want to deploy Dr. A Bookstore REST Walk. Yours will just be REST, but it's the same idea. And then if I make this a bit bigger, you'll see that Gradle decides to guess badly what to call this. I just want to launch my project at Dr. A Bookstore REST Walk. When I was doing this last night, I forgot to do this, and it was very confusing for a while. So do remember to deploy to a particular path here. You can, and we're launching that path with the default browser after we launch. So I should have a Tomcat Fall 2020 server here now. Let's run it, and we expect to see the page. Is there a couple of chats, Dr. K? Okay, no, okay.
No,
All
we're
right.
good.
So let me run that, and it'll pop up with my browser, which I will make full screen. And you can see that I'm going to Dr. A Bookstore REST Walk. Welcome to Dr. A's Bookstore served by Tomcat. So what we've just proven is we've got a running Tomcat that's serving pages to us. So that's a good start. The next step is let's set it up so that our little Tomcat here and ourselves can chat to the database. So let's go back to IntelliJ. And let's go back to here. All right, so the first thing to do is, can I connect to my database on the central CS5244 server? Dr. K has gone ahead and set it all up for each of you. So what we do is we're going to test, can we just do it from our machine? So let's use IntelliJ's database tool to just try and connect directly to the database, make sure that we can hit it from our machine. Things that get in the way are if you run a corporate VPN or a military VPN and you can't connect to this database, try turning the VPN off. That's a common problem that people have. So to set up a link to a database, you open up the database tool. That's also in View Tool Windows, database somewhere. Where is it? Database, there we go. I just turned it off again. All right, so let's create a new data source. That's MySQL. And then I am going to pick cs5244.cs.vt.edu as my host. The port is correct by default. My username is this. My password can be found as the last 4 digits of my Virginia Tech ID. You can look on HokiSpar to find it. So I'm typing in, if I can remember, mine. And the database that I'm connecting to is Dr. A Bookstore. So it'll be your bookstore with a DB at the end for database. So if we test that connection now, it'll take a second and we can connect. That's good news. Let's remember that. And it's called Dr. A Bookstore DB at CS5244. That shows up now in our database window as a source. And if we wanted to, we can see that I've got a schema with tables. And I'll probably have data in there already, but you will have your database name here with these tables underneath it. And you should see that. If you click on your data, if you click on the table, it will open up the table. I have data right now. You won't. You will get an empty screen. So I'm going to just have a look at, double click on book and see what is in my book table. I already have 16 books in my book table. But how did I get those 16 books? Well, that's the next step in the project. So first step is, can you connect to the database and see the tables even if they're empty? Now what we're going to do is we're going to work on getting our data into the database. I already have it, but that's okay. So what I'm suggesting in the walkthrough is underneath the main folder, make a folder called DB for database. Let's just put everything to do with our database in source main DB. It's right next to source name Java, source name web app, sort of fits there. And then we're going to create a file that is going to add data to our pre-existing database. So for me, I'm calling that file bookstoredata.sql. And you see IntelliJ is pretty smart and it knows, okay, it knows it's a SQL file, so it will help us with syntax and so on. So ahead of time, I've gone ahead and prepared my SQL file, and the beginnings of this SQL file up the top are given to you in the project description. So I think we sort of give you about this much. Maybe we don't give you the no inspection things. That's okay. It's a comment. So you're going to use your database. Then what we're going to do is delete from a few tables. So I'm going to wipe out all the books in my book table. and I'm going to wipe out all the categories in my category table, and then I'm going to re-add them. So you can run this script multiple times and it will just wipe out your database and re-add the data. And so if you get into a bit of a mess with wanting to just replace all the data in your database, you can use this script. So after we get rid of all the data that's already there, I want to run through a couple of insert statements. So this is SQL, structured query language. So we're going to insert a row into a table. And if we just say insert into table column name with values for the category table, I'm just going to insert these 4 categories into the category table in my database. So if we, so I'm going to run this file and, well, actually, why don't I do this? Why don't I prove that if I just run, no, I'm not going to do that. We'll just stick with explaining things first. So I'm going to put 4 categories into my table. Use spaces, use special characters if you need to. Put these values for category into your database as if they were going to show up on the screen that way. That'll mean they go straight onto the screen. Then when we're dealing with the book table, if we have a look at the book table, you can see every book has an ID, but that's going to be automatically assigned. So if I insert a row into the book table, the database is going to give me the ID for that book. So I'm inserting title, author, price is public, which turns into read only or not, and category ID. Those are all the columns in the database table that aren't automatically assigned. And then you can just give, you know, the title, the author, the price. The prices are going to be in cents or pennies. Sorry, I should say pennies here. And we're going to convert them for display into US dollar format. You want to have some books that are public and readable, some that are not. So some true, some falses here. And then the way that I know how to put 1001 for the category ID is when I insert 4 rows into this category table by name, it's going to start with 1001. Coding will be 1002, databases will be 1003, career will be 1004. So it starts with what we tell it. So if this book is in the classical coding section of my website, which it is, art of computer programming is definitely something to have on the bookshelf and open every now and then. So that's how we're going to, that's the meaning behind the SQL statements. Let's run this file. So you can actually right click the file. If you've connected to your database and this dot is green, you can right click the file and just say run the file. And what that will do is it'll open up a dialog. You can pick which data source you want. I'm going to choose run against the CS5244 server. I'm going to run that. And it will run each statement in that file, and basically if there's any problems, it will show up in red. But 23 of 23 statements executed. So we deleted all the books and categories, we added them back. So let's have a look at them. How do we see what's in our database now? That's all very well and good. Double click on a table, shows you what's in the database. My 16 books are back. I'll show you the categories.
And could I just say, while you're doing that, Dr. A,
sure.
That 1001, that is a requirement. Okay, your first category must be 1001, and the categories have to be sequential: 1002, 1003, 1004. Part of that is it's good practice not to start with 1, and part of that is for our testing purposes. So, and same thing with your books. The books need to start at 1001. They can't start at 1 or 2 or anything. So don't change that part of the SQL code.
All right. So thank you, Dr. K. So really quickly, I wanted to show you something about once you've got this all hooked up, the IntelliJ database tool can let you edit files. So if I wanted to change it to the Mythical Man year for something, I could double click on the cell, edit it, hit return, and then to commit it to the database, I would send it to the database like that. And you can double click again and change it back to month. So if you want to do some quick fixes on your data without going through the file, you can do that. Just remember that if you ever want to run the file again, you should probably keep the file up to date as well as doing by hand edits. But I wanted to show you that that's possible as well. So, all right, we've shown in place updates. The other thing to mention is I've got a few challenge questions at the end, but basically don't change the schema. If you think you want to change this schema, which is what columns are in what tables, ask on Piazza. All right. So we've connected directly to the database using IntelliJ. The next couple of minutes are just going to be what I call plumbing, which is going to let the web application running inside Tomcat also connect to the CS5244 database. So let's close these things out, close the tables, all that sort of stuff. All right, so basically when Tomcat runs, it uses a particular context.xml file to work out what resources it has in terms of accessing a database. And that belongs in a directory underneath web app called metainf. So this is plumbing piece number 1. Plumbing piece number 1 says, let's add a new file called context.xml. It will let, and I'm just going to paste this in. It's from the walkthrough, from the project description. This is basically saying, let's grab all our database connections from the database. It's very similar to what we set up in IntelliJ. It's just the way that our web app has to be told how to connect. So let's fix up a few things here. Let's fix up my name, Dr. A Bookstore. I'm going to leave my PID is 72. My PIN's going to be changed by me in a minute off screen. And my name is going to be Dr. A Bookstore DB. Just going to search for square brackets. Only one left. It's always a good check. All right, and I'm just going to move this off the screen so I can enter in my PIN. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. And I'm going to save that file and move to a different file and come back. So setting up plumbing piece number 1, put in your context.xml. Plumbing piece number 2, let's change our homepage, index.jsp. Let's change it from being just a simple message. Let's actually get it to output some data from the database. This will just help prove that it's the Tomcat web application that's connecting to the database. So we can, again, copy in from the project description a new index.jsp that has database content. So what have we got here? Mine is slightly modified. I did a bunch of border styling work that wasn't really necessary, but it just avoids having warnings. So I wanted to get my green tick in the right top here. So this issues this SQL query from the database and then basically paints a table onto the screen. So we're going to join the category and books tables, and we're going to basically output every book with some category information. The details of this aren't really that important. It's old style JSP. It's good for, this is a good example of using something for debugging, but we've provided it for you. So let's run the server again. and see what happens. We expect to see the database show up. So this is another trick that people have asked on Piazza, have run into on Piazza. If you start connecting to databases, you'll have database run configurations for when I ran this file, and then you'll have the server. So just double check, don't blindly click the run button, double check that you're running Tomcat is a little pro tip. So we'll run Tomcat and it should, if we're very lucky, work. If we're unlucky, it won't. And it works. So if I just zoom up a little bit, you can see that we're going through all the categories and we are outputting each book in each category with some details. So I think, Dr. K, I might have cheated a little bit too much there. Notice I needed to put Dr. A bookstore here. And I think you need to make sure that this matches your context.xml. But we can now hit a web page and get our web application to read from the database. But it's using a debugging tool, just something to paint a table. That's not entirely, so we've proven that it works. So that's good. Our plumbing is good. But what we need to do is we need to basically build what's called an API. So, you know, we want to be able to take the data out of our database and send it to our client project that we've been working on, our View project, over the network. We really want to expose all this book data, but in a programmatic way. And so the way you do that is with a REST API. Now, I'm just going to assume that you've read a little bit about them, but you make a request and we send back data in a JSON format, JavaScript object notation format. So that's what we're going to be building for the rest of the, so this is the end of part A in the project description. So if you see this, that's good. And try not to proceed without getting to this stage. It'll just make things easier to debug on Piazza, because if it's not clear, we're going to ask you, have you done part A? What step are you up to? So let's, if you see the table, it's a happy day because there's a fair bit of plumbing that's gone in so far. You've had to populate your own database and get your server set up. So now let's build our API. So actually, before we get to building, I want to mention, it's mentioned in the project description, but I have 4 categories, each with 4 books. That's a requirement. It's also a requirement that everything starts from 1001, and that some of these is public values should be true and some should be false. I am not really overlapping in terms of category names with Dr. A's example. So these are the books in my store.
Yeah, and a couple other things, I'll put this in the project description. But when Dr. A says some should be true and some are false, if you can, have some that are true and some that are false within each category, number one. Not if you can, just please do that. It'll make the grading easier again. And the other thing is, you know, make sure you have your own books. There can be some overlap, and certainly in categories there are going to be overlap, but, you know, have your own books. All right, that's it.
There are other fantasy books other than The Hobbit, Dr. K?
There are.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way, one thing Dr. A mentioned earlier as far as the category names was when you're populating the database with category names, yes, do put the spaces in. So if you have science fiction, just put, quote, science space fiction, close quote. And that should work fine. And that's the best way to do it, actually.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to build our API. So let's expose this book database to the world. So I'm going to start off again with more plumbing. This is just the way this project is. We're setting you up, and most of this setup is once off. So if we're going to be doing our real API, we're going to need a few more libraries. So the way we do that, anyone know what we're going to do if I need more libraries? What file am I going to edit if I need more libraries to depend on? Yeah, the build.gradle file, right. So if I go to my build.gradle, and again, I will try and fix up the cut and paste issues that happen off the project description. I've pre-cut and pasted and formatted these. So what we're saying is here, I'm just importing a few Jersey libraries. Jersey is a framework that lets you build API servers pretty nicely. And we're going to be learning that. It's an implementation of the Jdks RS, basically the JavaX REST specification. There's many different libraries. I'm most familiar with Jersey, so it's a very valid choice out there in the real world. Basically, Jersey depends on some things that are even older. And after JDK 9, you've got to be a little bit more explicit about bringing in some older things. So this is really just because we're not using JDK 8 anymore. We have to add that in. There are libraries now. If we've added libraries, we want to make sure that the IntelliJ has picked up the latest interpretation of what we've just said in our Gradle file. So I'm going to click on the elephant here. You can actually, what I'll do this time is open the Gradle tool and click on the refresh or the reload. If I ask you, have you refreshed your project or your Gradle, have you refreshed IntelliJ from Gradle? I mean, open up the Gradle toolbar and hit this circle. And I guess I can't really see where it indicated that it worked, but I guess that's because I have got other things open. Build, did it tell me in build? Yes, it did. Okay. All right, 539. Yep, that's right now. Okay. All right, so we've got our extra libraries loaded up. We're not using them yet. So now what I'm going to do is the instructions say, let's do a lot of plumbing by unpacking some zip files that we've given you as starter code. So I'm going to go to my terminal here, and I'm in my REST walk. I'm going to go into the source main folder. All right, source main Java. All right, I'm in source main Java. I'm going to unzip I'm going to unload business.zip that I downloaded last night. And what you'll see is that has created a business folder with a bunch of code underneath it. And then, and don't ask me how I remember this, but I downloaded this API thing a couple of times and I want to make sure I get the latest one. So I'm going to unzip the api.zip. I just downloaded it a couple extra times. So there's our API folder. So if we refresh IntelliJ, where did that button go for me? File. Well, maybe it's already there. Okay, they're already there. It's fine. There was some button to refresh everything in IntelliJ or reread files from disk. I just can't see it because of Zoom probably at the moment. Okay, so we're going to have a bunch of code underneath here that we've provided you. The first thing to do is to check that we can still build the project. So clicking the hammer can build your project and hopefully open the build window. Right, if you open the build window. So this is a good little check that we haven't broken you by adding our own code. So you need the libraries loaded and then unpack the zip files and everything should still build. If that's not true, ask on Piazza. So I'm going to walk through this code in a minute, but I'm going to get rid of some more plumbing first. So 2 more items to get this working. The first item is we need a way of telling Tomcat to start using Jersey. Start using the Jersey REST framework, please, when you boot up. So this is just initialization, but it's done in underneath web app in another folder called webinf that we're going to make. So context.xml lives in metainf. And if I can, let me see if I can create that directory, and web.xml lives in webinf. Now these are just conventions underneath what's called the servlet specification, which is old technology, but it just does affect how things are laid out still. So this is kind of just by experience and convention, you'll know what files do what. So what we've done here is we're saying, okay, look, startup Jersey, look at our API package underneath the Java directory to get information about what to do when you initialize, and every path that we're going to access, that we're going to ask with our browser from the server will start with /API. And that's just going to be a standard prefix that we're going to use. So this sets all that up. It's just complete boilerplate, but I'll come, if there's any questions about that, I'll come back to it when we're testing this. All right. One more piece of plumbing is I have to edit a file called JDBC utils because Dr. K has left a reference to his database in a piece of code that accesses the database. So now I'm going to tell you an IntelliJ shortcut. If I hit Shift, left shift twice quickly, it brings up something that lets me search everything, classes, files, symbols, actions that I can do in the IntelliJ. So if I know that I want to edit a JDBC utils file, it's telling me, oh, that's in the business package and here it is. So if I open that, you'll see it flips me to where the file is in the project window and it opens the file. So you can jump around files using Shift and typing file names. It actually turns out to be a bit faster, I think, rather than clicking around the tree. And it lets you see where the tree opens, so you get to learn indirectly where things are. You can certainly use the tree as well. I just wanted to show you another way. So we need to change this to your name bookstore. So I need to change that to Dr. A bookstore.